When you really start working with your dreams, you feel this sense of there's a deeper part of me that's like kind of holding the space and showing me the way. And it's just such a beautiful sense of being with that part of yourself. Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions. I am Deborah Burnt Maldonado, and I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado with Creative Mind. And we are continuing our series here on this episode of Jung's philosophy. And we're talking about dreams today. And before we begin, I do want to remind you, if you're watching us on YouTube, please click the button here in the corner to subscribe to our channel. And so, Rob, dreams. We're not talking about reaching your dreams. We're talking about actual dreams at night.
Dreaming at night,
yes.
Yeah. We talked about Carl Jung's personality types and psychological types. And then we talked about kind of this bigger aspect of the collective unconscious and archetypes. So now we get to dreams, and we talked about a little bit about mythology on the last episode. So dreams kind of follow in those footsteps of mythology because they represent the personal myth.
The personal myth.
The personal myth. It's a way for you to experience your personal mythology.
I always think of dreams as this other part of yourself that's having another experience besides the waking life. It's like another life that you're experiencing. And many times it has no bounds, and it doesn't have the same rules that we have here. Just another way where our psyche is expressing itself.
Yeah. There's a quote by Jung where he says, people forget, or modern people forget, that the way God used to speak to people was through dreams. And you see it in the Bible, you see it in the Quran, you see it in many Hindu scriptures and epics. Dreams were a gateway into the divine, or the way the divine expressed itself through human nature. So very powerful elements that, we're not saying that's the reality or that's the truth, right? That's the way ancient people understood the dreams. But Jung was, or let's say he gives us a way to understand them psychologically. That if there is this collective unconscious that is the reservoir of humanity's experiences, then we're drawing from that well of wisdom through dreams.
And you'll notice, like, dreams aren't limited to your personal experience. A lot of people relate their dreams to everyday life. They had a dream about their school when they were kids, or house, childhood home, or the work stress. I have a Zoom nightmare sometimes. And but we're talking about these weird dreams that we're like, where did we come up with that? And what part of our mind created that?
I did a lot of work with families, and when I was speak to the kids in the families, I would ask them, what do you dream about at night? Incredibly rich and mythological symbols in their dreams. What happens is then, as they're growing up, the adults in the family usually don't know how to help them interpret and kind of understand what the messages that are coming through in the dreams mean. Therefore, they start to not pay attention to them. So gradually, by the time they're these older kids and teens and young adults, they've forgotten about those important experiences in the night and through dreams. So it's a shame, because you can cultivate children's kind of attention to their dreams by simply acknowledging it and
just talking about them,
helping them talk about it and draw images and experience those things in a meaningful way. So that was my experience. I grew up in a family that they had some great dreamers in it. They understood the importance of dreams and the connection to native traditions in Mexico and the Great Southwest in the America and North America. So I always paid attention. I always kept a record. I always kind of tried to interpret my dreams. And then once I got to school, then I headed straight for the depth psychology department, right? Whoever was doing those kind of studies and looking at those things, that's where I hung out. And I got an introduction to kind of the scientific understanding of dreams.
And did you originally study Freudian dream interpretation or Jungian dream interpretation?
Yes, initially Freud, because Freud is still considered the father or the godfather or the the great grandfather, whatever, of psychology, right? Anybody that develops a new psychology has to
Start at the beginning.
Yeah, well, they have to pay homage to Freud and compare it to his thought and how it compares to the work he did. So we go back to 1898, 99. Freud completes his book on dream interpretation. He's about 40 years old at that time, but he waits to the year 1900, being the great promoter of his work that he was. He knew that would have kind of a more of an impact, perhaps.
The new...
kind of symbolic, right? The turn of the century, and here's a new psychology about dreams. And unfortunately, the book was a flop in his time.
Wow.
It only sold a few hundred copies. But we know it today, right? We're still talking about it because as time went on and as he developed his psychoanalytic theories and promoted his work, it became a staple of psychology, his interpretation of dreams. So we owe a lot to Freud, and we should not dismiss his work. But of course, his heir apparent at the time, he was ready to hand the mantle over to Carl Jung. Jung at that time started publishing his own ideas, and there was a big break, right? Because Jung was more interested in the mystical and the comparative religious kind of symbolism that he was seeing in his patients and his own dreams. And Freud was very cautious about appearing to be mystical in any way because he was trying to establish psychology as a science or psychoanalysis as a scientific approach to the mind. And so they had a big break. So what is the difference between Freud and Jung as far as the dream work? Definitely that Freud only saw the psyche as a personal matter. In other words, anything
it's related to your personal experience.
Yes.
Yeah. Your lifetime.
Anything that came from your unconscious mind was about your personality, about your experiences, about your mother, about your father, about your work. Very personal. Whereas Jung, because of his understanding, or let's say in his model, he included the collective unconscious, which is that repository of symbols and images and experiences of all humanity. His work with dreams is very different, right? Then we're getting into archetypal realms of these numinous symbols, as he calls them, arising from the unconscious and having a direct influence on human behavior, human culture, human society.
Well, Freud still talks about myths like the Oedipus complex, and so the dreams, but they weren't interpreted as universal. They were more interpreted as symbolic in that way.
That's right.
And then Jung would say, well, there's a bigger picture here. There's something more profound happening than just you dealing with your mommy issues or complexes, and there's something more profound happening on the collective level.
That we're kind of simplifying Freud's contribution, because if you read some of his work, he's kind of suggesting that there is this connection to mythology and to ancient history, but he shies away from acknowledging it openly.
I wonder if he really was curious about what Jung was doing, but felt like he wanted to market himself as a scientist, and that held him back, and maybe unconsciously or subconsciously, as he would say, he prevented himself from like kind of opening up that can of worms, where Jung was more like ready and open to explore more of the psyche in that way. Yeah.
Although Jung himself didn't publish his Red Book until after his death, or he left instructions not to publish the Red Book until well after his death.
And it's so interesting. So dreams, what can we do with them? The everyday person that's like, just wants to have a better life, wants to have more spiritual connection to their deeper selves.
Yeah.
Well, how can dreams contribute to that?
So there's two levels, because Jung kind of saw that the persona, meaning our over-identification as persona, the mask, our social role, is paying attention to dreams in a sense, because dreams have this compensatory function, the function of compensation, of compensating for our conscious attitude from the unconscious, like a homeostasis, balancing act that is taking place in the ordinary world of everyday life. In other words, your personality is always being balanced out by the dreams, by the unconscious, and giving you hints. Now, even if you're not aware of dreams, even if you're not paying attention to dreams, just the fact that you're dreaming at night will tend to balance out your personality. Mm-hmm. So let's say we've seen this very clearly in some of the people that we've worked with, when they have very logical, strict, kind of methodical, jobs. Let's say they're accountants or those kind of careers that demand that kind of structure. Often the dreams are very colorful, mystical, full of symbolic, creative expressions to balance out their persona, essentially, the way they present themselves in the world.
So that would be messy, like even like the perfectionists, they would have a lot of messiness in their dreams, and they're dealing with the messiness. I also think too that another compensation I see a lot is we're not taught to express our anger. So we are not even conscious that we have anger. And so we have dreams where people are angry at us, or there's a lot of, anger in the dream, and like, oh, that's interesting. And so when that shows up, it's like, am I expressing anger? Or am I in touch with my own anger in my conscious life? And so it's a way for our psyche to kind of say, this needs to be more integrated, because when you're off balance, you can exhaust yourself, and you can actually harm your body if you're repressing a lot of anger and it's just happening on the unconscious level. Your body is hanging on to that energy, and you're not able to even consciously perceive it. And dreams are a great way to see where we're off balance. There's also been ways to restore health too. There's famous dreams that people have of like knowing there was some health issue happening, and it's like telling us, symbolically, you need to do this or that to bring yourself back into balance.
Absolutely. So we can see that one of Jung's contribution to dream work was this idea of compensation, right? And it seems to hold true, right? Because as we work with people, we see this in active practice, right? That the dreams are performing this function very well. But the second level that he talks about is dreams as a guide to the individuation process. Now it takes it to a whole other level, because
it's like not just fixing like surface issues. It's this is the life journey that you're on, your personal myth, basically.
That's right. Individuation is the process of transformation that each individual can undergo, and I think is meant to undergo, but because there are no social structures to guide people through this process, people miss out on this opportunity, and they don't fulfill their destiny in this sense. They're not able to take to transcend their persona, let's say. But because the ego persona, from Jung's perspective, is like a temporary function. It helps us survive in the world, and then it helps us fit into society by creating the persona. But he says that's not the whole aim of human life. It is to transcend the persona. And that transcending is what he called individuation.
So the first part of life is building up this ego, having these conditioned defenses and responses to survive. And the second part of life is letting that ego go and transcending it. And the difference between Jungian work and Freudian is about making the ego just better, shining it up, where Jung talked about transcending the ego, with that there's another self besides the ego identity. That self-identity we call I, personality. We're so much more than our personality types. We are this deeper, more profound self, and that's what he wanted to lead people to experience, which is the universal, the unlimited self that people talk about, and that's striving to access that. That's what individuation is. It's not individualism. It's more individuating means you're becoming your own self from your conditioning, which was formed by society and culture and life experiences. You're actually making a choice as to who you want to become versus kind of managing this self-identity in the past that you've become.
To put it bluntly, as he did sometimes, the herd mentality. You're individuating from the herd mentality, meaning instead of following the rules of society and just going along because everyone else is doing it, you're really starting to think for yourself and finding that inspiration from within you. Now, dreams, then, he says, have this take on a very different role than the ordinary compensation function. Dreams then become a map, a guide. I always think of it as how the headlights of the car illuminate the road up ahead. Dreams serve this function. As you start to individuate, your dream life is illuminating what is coming up in your inner work. It's illuminating what's ahead.
And so just to distinguish, because I get this question a lot from our students, from clients, is it predicting the future? Is it predicting the future? And people often take their dreams literally, and they don't see it as a symbolic interpretation, because many times the people in the dreams are someone in their waking life. So they think, oh, that person's leaving me, or this person is angry at me, or I'm going to lose my job, all these things. But it's more like, what is the symbolism here? Like looking beyond just what the dream is literally saying, and understanding what is really happening. And when we think about it from individuation, it's like, these are the things that are ahead of you in your own process, in your own psyche's process, versus looking at life events, just life events in general, like the outer life. So it's like this inner world that we're becoming, versus this is going to happen next year, and I'm having a prediction. Now, we do have precognitive dreams. They definitely have them. I mean, we've all had them, where we had a dream and then it shows up. But so it's understanding your own mind and your own and practicing dream interpretation that you start to distill which ones are precognitive and which are more symbolic. And then, of course, don't get scared when you have a nightmare or a terrifying dream. Many times it's just the psyche trying to get your attention and not warning you of danger, but just kind of talking about, maybe kind of cultivating an emotion that you need to pay attention to, or predict that this emotion is up for you right now that you have to deal with. So I think it's really important to remember that it's not literal. When you think of the spotlight, like, oh, I'm going to get married in 6 months, and I'm going to have this happen, and I'm getting a new job. And sometimes it's not like that at all.
That's right. It is a symbolic language, very akin to mythology. That's the connection right there. That's why our dreams are our personal myth, right? And the myth, the universal myths that people write down and pass on, are the collective dream. It's the dream of our collective mind. So in interpretation, in Jungian dream interpretation, and especially the way we use it in our Jungian coaching model, then becomes this way of guiding our path of individuation towards the self. How do we transcend our ego? How do we go beyond our persona and our personal conditioning so that we can transcend and find deeper inspiration, deeper sources of wisdom within ourselves? And it is, like Jung says, it's the source of all great art. This collective unconscious that we're tapping into, it's where these powerful images that then become religious icons or spiritual practices, that's where they come from. They come from this deeper layer of the psyche called the collective unconscious.
That's why when we see symbols and we're like in a church or in a temple, we feel this, even great art, there's this symbolism that like reaches us at a deeper level. And for me, dreams, it just brings me closer to my divine self versus my human self. It helps me, I don't know, it makes life more rich and more colorful, more creative and imaginative. It's just so when you really pay attention to them. And I always find too that the more you pay attention to them and write them down, the more they come and the more you remember them, the dream recall. So one of the things that we hear a lot is some people say, I never dream. And we all dream. We dream about 4 to 5 dreams a night. It's just that you probably can't recall it. Some things that impede our dream recall, sometimes if you have sleep aids, if you're using any medication to help you sleep, you probably won't get into that REM state where you can have that recall and then bring it back. Not always, but that could be the case. But you can always train yourself to remember your dreams by every morning before you, set the intention before you go to bed, and then in the morning just write down anything on a piece of paper, like even if it's just like I had a good night's sleep, or I didn't remember my dreams, but I will tomorrow. And you just start writing it down, and it just kind of gets your, it shifts your, like sets the intention so that you can remember. And a lot of our clients say that it works when we do that. So those of you who have trouble, like I want to remember my dreams, that would be a great tip. And then how do we interpret them? How do we look at them? Yeah,
because it is a symbolic language. It is very similar to learning another language. Instead of, because if you hear another language, you might hear sounds that sound familiar to you, right? But other sounds that you're not used to, they're unknown to you. And the mistake that we make often, or that people make, is that they go for the literal interpretation, like you said, that they think if I dreamed of something dramatically violent or
someone
an accident,
dying, like if someone dying or them dying.
Yeah, that must mean something bad. And that's a mistake. Dreams, in using a very ancient symbolic language, appear very, very bizarre to our waking consciousness.
You wake up, and we've all had those dreams like, what the heck was that?
Yes, what was that about?
Yeah.
But once you start to understand the symbolic language, the phrasing, the code that it uses visually, and it uses puns and humor sometimes to get its message across, then it starts to make sense. Like we were saying in myths, blood often represents sacrifice or cleansing. It doesn't mean what it means for us in our waking world, like danger and alarm.
Like death means transformation. That was a big thing I learned. And so when something is dying, it's transforming. And that's, it's not saying that person's going to die. A lot of people get scared when they have those dreams. Yes. It's like there's a transformation happening. And and then the mind, the psyche uses people we know because it helps us connect it. Like when you ever speak to someone who does not know your language, you find some common symbol that you can relate to, and that the unconscious is trying to make a connection, and it might not be exact. So if it's your boss, you're dreaming about what does that person represent to you? What is the emotion around it? What's that relationship? And it's kind of showing something more symbolic about it than that actual person.
Absolutely. And other people in the dream are really talking about you, not the other people.
Everyone is you in the dream.
Yes.
You hear that, but it's true. Everything is, and in waking life too. They're all. Jung says that everyone is reflecting your own psyche that you're seeing in the world.
So obviously, let's say dream interpretation is a much bigger conversation. But in general, the principle to remember is that it is a different language. It's a symbolic language. Do not read it literally. Do not take it literally. The practice begins by learning mythology, understanding the language of myth. What is it trying to communicate morally, metaphorically? Because if you understand myths, you have a pretty good chance of understanding dreams as well.
Yeah. If you think about movies, even modern movies, and a lot of fantasy movies have like the symbols, like the Lord of the Rings, and it's always a symbol that's taking someone on a journey. That's kind of what think about your own personal myth, your own journey. The dream is giving you the jewel or this magic sword, and this is what's going to assist you on your journey. And if you think about it that way, not how to get things in the world, but how do I become the best of myself? How do I go on the journey of self-realization? Then it becomes a very mystical, deep exploratory experience to look at dreams. But I think, just to give you some simple tips, there is something that Jung came up with was active imagination. And that is a tool that you can use to interpret a symbol. If you don't know what it is, how would you describe active imagination or a way to use it with this symbol?
Yes.
So say I dreamt of a boat that was sinking. What would I do?
Yeah, when you get fragments or really important key symbols, you can use active imagination to get more information from the unconscious mind. So what you do in a meditative, contemplative state, you visualize that symbol, just like the way you remember it in the dream, the boat in the water sinking. And you take your time, focus on it to where you're able to see it clearly, and then wait a little bit, and it'll start to move. In other words, the mind is never static, so it's always evolving and moving. It will start to, the unconscious will start to fill in the blanks and provide more information about that symbol.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is observing, taking note.
Yeah, it's not like a guided meditation where you're going to do something with the boat. It's more you're open and just receiving and just letting the psyche speak to you. It's like listening, basically.
That's a good way to say it.
Side. And then he has another a tool he calls amplification, where you just look at all your associations. So if you have a dream about a person, write down all your associations with that person, what they represent to you, what their personality is like. That will give a clue. And it's sort of like putting a puzzle together. It's you're getting this sentence in a different language, and you're trying to decipher like the hieroglyphics of what's the story my psyche is trying to tell me. And you know what I love about dreams too? I feel like there's a part of me that kind of loves me so much. It's like helping me along the journey, and it feels like you're not alone. When you really start working with your dreams, you feel this sense of there's a deeper part of me that's like kind of holding the space and showing me the way. And it's just such a beautiful sense of being with that part of yourself.
Yeah. One of the important aspects in dream interpretation is the feeling tone. Which means just kind of what are the emotions that these images elicit in you? What comes up for you? In understanding the feeling, the emotion associated with the symbols, it gives you a big clue as to the meaning, right? Because emotion is about meaning. Therefore, whatever emotion comes up, you can read it, especially in someone who is in the process of individuating. You can read it as this is an important part of your work, that you need to look at this emotion through this symbol, or that this symbol is pointing to this emotion. And it's a great way of adding to the understanding of the symbols.
And you might not get the full meaning. Sometimes there's like a sequence of dreams that you'll dream every night that gives you a bigger, like kind of a chapter, a different chapter. And so we recommend that you have a journal that you just put your dreams in, and you keep a record. And you could go back. Like I remember a dream I had 20 years ago that maybe longer, 30 years ago. Ooh. Well, maybe, yeah, I don't know. It was a long time ago. And I remember it very clearly, but I didn't understand Jungian dream interpretation. So I just wrote down my soulmate dream. And it was like this really elaborate dream about me being in a hurry and going to miss the plane. And this man shows up. And, it's just kind of a lot of symbols. And now that I know Jungian dream interpretation, I can now go back and look at that dream and say, wow, that was interesting what that dream was actually telling me. And even though it doesn't help me today, but it helps me understand, wow, in that stage of my life, it helps me understand how dreams work and to not take them literally. And so one more question, Rob. What about dream dictionaries? I know a lot of people ask about that. And what is your opinion on getting a dream dictionary?
I used to be more of a purist, but now I'm a little bit more loose because...
You're a little loose.
There is no right or wrong way to approach, just like approaching the learning of a new language. There's many ways to do it. But the most of the stuff that we see on the internet, I would not take it seriously because it's kind of written from, they're not, most of them are not using serious models of the psyche.
Like psychology, it's more like superstition in a way. Yeah.
Perhaps, or a kind of stuff they borrow from different models, from the tarot cards or different myths or something like that, or just their own intuitive interpretation of symbols. Always consider looking at a comprehensive system, right? Because that is really the function of the psyche. Remember, it's a living organism, so it has principles and laws that it operates under. So Jung's work, for example, accounts for a lot of the things that are going on in the psyche.
So understanding individuation and the stages of individuation, from shadow work to working with archetypes to working with patterns in the psyche, collective unconscious, understanding that and then applying it to the dream is a lot more comprehensive, you're saying, than just giving that quick fix, like, oh, I think I'm going to get a raise next week because I had a dream about a case of gold showing up. Yeah. I also think too that I agree with you that you don't want to be a purist, like don't look at those. We want to be careful, but I think the number one reason is that your symbol, for your dream, is very personal, unique to just you, like a fingerprint. So if you are judging your whole psyche on a generic interpretation, that's really where we can get into trouble, because we're missing the point because it's personal to us. But I think there's some universal symbols that we can all, like, if you understand the universal symbols and kind of have it like almost like the framework, the scaffolding of the dream, then you can go and the little symbols that come are more like personal to you, especially people in your dream or things that are going on your journey in life that are reflective in dreams. You don't want to discount and just take a generic interpretation of a symbol and not take it on in a personal level, because a sword can mean one thing to one person and one thing to another person.
It's certainly a deep topic. And then there are different types of dreams that you can only really understand through practice. So with practice and learning from others, right, people that have more experience, then kind of gives you that understanding that what kind of dream is this? What is it? At what level is it operating? Is it at just the persona level? Is it talking about my everyday experiences? Or is it pointing to something bigger, right? Because we all have those big dreams that we know, just like that dream that you remember 30 years later or still remember. Those are big dreams, meaning they contain much more than just a compensation of your persona. They're talking about your spiritual purpose, something much bigger in your life.
Yeah, like the dream was about a man, but I didn't know it was my animus. And then I thought it was, this is just man that's coming into my life. But no, it's like connecting with this animus, which is part of Jungian psychology, and understanding that. And, this is why in our training, we always have our students post their dreams and we all look at them and that's the way to practice and really get good at it, is to interact and get feedback from people that understand dream interpretation, and if you're into Jungian dream interpretation, people understand the individuation process, and then it's like an art that you learn, and then you get just better and better at it over time. For me, in the beginning, it was like I can know basic interpretation, and now I could, as I've been working on it for years, like give more elaborate interpretations. But the best person to interpret your dreams is yourself. So if you work with a coach, like we train our coaches, they're not interpreting the dream, they're kind of guiding and giving a framework so the client can interpret their own dreams, and that's very powerful. You don't want anyone telling you this is what this dream means because they don't know. They're not in your psyche, and it's about understanding and working collaboratively with someone to understand that deeper layer. And then what do you do with it once you understand it? There's like, okay, well, what do I do with this dream now that I know it? So that's another part of the psyche.
And that's a good ending point for us, that the aim of Jungian dream work is integration. Integration of what? Integration of the unconscious content. You want to integrate it into your awareness, into your conscious world. Then it becomes part of your conscious awareness.
So thank you again for joining us for another episode of Soul Sessions. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, click the button here in the corner, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next week for another episode.